Good. All right. Reset. What is happening, fam? It is your boy, the Soulness Sativa, the Ayatollah of Indica, a.k.a. the Bobby Fischer of BHO, a.k.a. the Hicks and Gracie of Hash, a.k.a. the Gordon Ryan of Ganja, a.k.a. the President of United Bakes of America, Donald Blunt, a.k.a. Abraham Lincoln. I'm here today with another brand spanking new episode of Let's Toke About It, and I got a very special guest, a good friend of mine, the Peter Frampton of Psychedelics, a.k.a. the Oscar Wilde of OC, a.k.a. the Hemingway of Harleys, Cheyne Truitt.
Damn, those are great. Did you think about them a long time?
No, I thought about. So my process with the names is I just in the coming weeks, I kind of just throw some things around in my head, and then I just lock them in the subconscious, and I just let them evolve in the brain. And then today, when I was on my way down here, I took some quiet time in the car, and I said, all right, let me think of some good ones for Shane. Let me put them together right now. And, so sometimes they have no real rhyme or reason, but I figured I'd go kind of, got two of them author themed, because obviously you are now a published author.
Self-published.
Hey,
still.
Published is still in the title.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's true.
And, obviously we go way back. This is something I probably should have done years ago anyway. But I'm stoked that I can be the first guy to interview you right after the new Fade into Reach, available now.
Yes, sir.
First and foremost, let's go ahead and get that out of the way. Where can people get the book?
They could contact me online. There will be a website with a portal that you can order physical copies, but it'll also have links to all the digital platforms, of which it's on all of them. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any Kindle platform, any overseas Kindle or Nook platform, Apple Books, all that. And the audiobook will be out in about 8 weeks, which will be cool. That'll also be available on all of the digital platforms, Apple Books, Kindle, all that stuff.
Right here. So tell me about the artwork.
So there's a local artist named Mark Eamon. He was a cartoonist for the local paper for decades, and local skateboarder, surfer, grew up knowing my family. Prolific amount of artwork, really just genuinely kind dude, super intelligent, incredibly talented. He owns a retail store in town called Ragamuffin, and you could follow him on Instagram at Stinky Beach Studio. But he's amazing, so I couldn't have made it happen without him. I knew that I just wanted some visualizations from the literature, and had a pretty nuanced idea of what this guy was looking at, the protagonist, and what the glue of the story is. The ponies are really important, not to the narrative, but to the overall spirit of the story. So I knew I wanted to include them on the cover as well as our protagonist.
Did you just describe what it is that you wanted, or did you give him a pre-copy of the book to read and visualize himself?
Yeah, good question. So I sent him an early draft before it was even finished, so he could read through some of it. And then we had a great conversation, and we talked about what it was I saw in terms of the cover being. And I explained that I wanted the spirit of his artwork to influence it more. The story speaks for itself. It's there regardless, And unless someone came along and they're like, we want to make a film, or I decided that I wanted to make a short film or something, it would be not difficult, but it would be a different approach, because it would be coming from my creative engine internally. And I really love Mark's art, and I wanted the cover to be stylized. I didn't want it to look like an airport novel, and, the big dramatic letters and dark, colored artwork that's too heavily saturated and just like doom and gloom, of which the book has a fair amount of, but I wanted it to feel almost more like a children's novel on the cover. I wanted it to feel a little bit more bouncy and alive, and not look like what this sort of book's cover would typically look like. I wanted it to set apart a bit.
I love the artwork. From the moment I saw it, I thought it was something that would grab me. Like in a bookstore. And I like to think of myself as pretty well read.
You are.
And when I'm in a bookstore, or in a library, I'm a big believer that the books pick you, and so like I feel like that's one that I would gravitate to in a bookstore. So for me, I already knew I was going to get right into it. I haven't finished it yet, but I'm into it.
Yeah, I love that.
It's such a cool. There's an element, obviously, for me. I know all these places, and so like the details are accurate. Like taking the bus from Cumberland, having to stop in Baltimore, then stop in Annapolis, then Salisbury, and then Ocean City. Like that's the route. And it seemed like you really took the time to think about these things, and that's why, because I know you and I know your history with psychedelics, I feel like there's a heavy psychedelic influence in that. When I'm tripping, it's bringing me to a place where you're like breaking every little detail down. And I feel like you really did that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It was, like anyone writing anything, academic text, biography, whatever, your fiction, there will be some research you have to do.
Yeah.
That's going to be any book. One, you're going to have to research what you've already written for the book. You're going to have to look back through everything, keep notes, refer to an outline that you're adjusting, because as you get further and further into the narrative, there's going to be callback or consistencies you have to be careful with, so that there's a through line that's intelligible. You don't want it to get lost, or refer to something that you refer to incorrectly later in terms of volume or dates or whatever. And then when it comes down to things like what you're referring to, bus routes and locations and breaking certain things down, obviously there's influences there, and people I love, whether it's filmmakers or novelists, that have taken a certain approach to delineating a set or a scene for people. So to me, it was really important to really consider all of those things. I don't want to assume any reader is stupid, and I want to make sure that it feels crunchy and valuable. I want even the most unimportant aspects of the book, the way that they move through a room or how they discuss things with people, just basic things like he packed his bag, he did XYZ, stuff that doesn't really have much to do with the narrative. I wanted that to feel visceral, like you were there, and to make it easy for you to really cling on to what's happening in that present moment and really kind of stay on the ride. Because of the temporal style that the book's written in, going back and forth from two time periods, I wanted you to be really rooted in each one. I wanted it to be clear and precise when we switched from one chapter to the next, and you were going from 15 year back and 15 year forward, to not feel confusing, to not feel like, oh, or wait, are we back in the past? Are we in the present again? Like, what's happening here? I wanted it to be easy. So I wanted to make sure I'm calling back to things and including things to kind of root you in that time period that the chapter's intended to explain.
Yeah, I was honestly pretty surprised when I got to chapter 2, and we're like full on in a prison, like Supermax type situation. And, he's having a cool conversation with his buddy, during a workout. And just the little details when it comes to in both sides of the story, where it's like you kind of feel where he's like in the, in the post-apocalyptic time, he's referring back to that time. And so there's a good fluidity, I think, between the two,
Yeah, that part's fun. And, the prison stuff, films I love, books I love, people I know that have unfortunately had to spend time in prison. I was lucky to have an appreciation for that culture, which, make no mistake, there is a culture to that, carceral life, but also to, have firsthand accounts of certain things and also films that I love, and it was important to me to really be true to that.
How long did it take you from start to finish of pen to paper, starting a draft? And
Yeah. So I started, first off, I've always read a lot. I was going through a period where I was just reading a tremendous amount, and a lot of audiobooks too. With my job, it's easy to keep an earbud in all day and just listen to audiobooks, and you listen to a tremendous amount of work. And people will have kind of highfalutin opinions about audiobooks, and I understand, even ebooks, and I'd much prefer to hold a paper book in my hand. But if I'm being realistic, just about time allotment that most people have, it gets difficult to get through much if you're reading the 15 minutes a day you have available, which is fine as well. I don't mean to be pejorative about that, but when it comes down to it, if you really have an appetite for specific amounts of, you're trying to read enough, or you're excited enough about a specific piece of work or a novel, the audiobooks are nice. It's a good bridge, especially if you get a great narrator, or and there's a lot of them that are killer. And I was listening to the Cormac McCarthy catalog again, and I was getting pretty into it. And I had written a lot for work through music and that sort of stuff, but never written a narrative story. I had played around with trying to write screenplays, and when I was shooting photos and video all the time, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try to make a short film or something, which I would still love to do one day. But given my current lifestyle and my job, I was just like, all right, well, I have enough time every day or every other day to work on something. So let me start the process. So I did some research. I really just kind of took it super binary. I was like, all right, what's the best way to approach a project like this? And ended up going with an outline first. I wanted to set bullet points, really see where I wanted the story to go, kind of give myself a map from start to finish, and then make notes about how I wanted those things to move from one to the next. And it took about 2 months doing that. Wasn't really busting my ass doing it. I was sitting down at the coffee shop. When I had 30 minutes at the end of the night on the couch, I was taking notes and just kind of keeping my brain turned on about it on autopilot, and watching a ton of films, still reading a lot of books. So really trying to draw from things that I love. And after about 2 months, I remember it was the end of April of 2020. Yeah. End of April of 2023, Abby and I actually took a boat trip with our friends. And I brought my iPad with me, and we had some long trips on the water. So I just took that time to really start chipping away at the text. So I was like, what a great place to set the tone.
right.
I'm surrounded by good people. I'm not working, this is how I relax. This would be great. And kind of started there. Probably got close to 2 chapters done on that trip because I had so much free time, and obviously went back and there was a lot of revision and stuff like that, but then just kept moving forward. And it took me I finished the text close to early July 2024. So the better part of a year and a half to get everything done, including the out.
It blows me away that it's like, oh, I think I'm going to try and write a book.
Well, you know me. That's how I've been about a lot of things.
For sure.
Not to say they've all been successful or that they didn't even go badly, but I have like a compulsive issue almost. And if I feel like I'm interested in something, or I really appreciate some aspect of culture, music, film, whatever, I'm like, oh, I should try to do that. That's how I appreciate it. Yeah. And writing a book has been in the back of my head for 15 years. But just didn't have a well enough developed sense of how I wanted things to go. And never really could get it off the launch pad in terms of even making a decision about doing it. So it was really gratifying, and I'm going to definitely do more for sure.
How did you when you start coming up with an outline, was it pretty evident from the beginning this was kind of the path you were going to take? Like, this is the story you wanted to tell?
Yeah, I had a pretty specific idea about how I wanted things to go. I knew how I wanted them to start and end. You know, I knew what kind of conflict I wanted to see come into view. But I think any writer, I've watched so many interviews now and I've talked to other authors that I really love and just kind of picked their brain a little bit, which was lucky. And a lot of them said the same thing. And I found that to be true, is that you can have really specific ideas before you get into the text about how you want things to go. And as you work your way through the meat of the book, things will change because there's going to be a feeling or a feel to the narrative that is ultimately altered by how things actually end up going down on paper. You might have a specific idea about how you want to go from A to B, but what's required of the character or characters to do that might alter the realism of it, how it feels. You don't want things to feel affected or, constructed. You want it to feel like a natural momentum. And as such, I think a lot of people would attest to the fact that you're going to end up making decisions differently than you would have in your mind before the book is started, before you've even started working on the narrative.
So I was thinking about on the way down here, I've probably known you since I was 14.
Yeah.
Anytime I come down to OC, lurking at the cool spots on the boardwalk, which was obviously Dimensions and Swirl World.
Yep.
It'd be you and Will
Mm-hmm.
at one or both places and just like lurking around. How much do you feel like your influence from Ocean City like played on your perspective for this book? Because I'd say you're a Ocean City OG at this point.
Oh God, yeah, that's true. So yeah, I mean, I was gone for a long time too, right? And I still ended up back here, and I always swore I wouldn't. Not because I don't like it. I love it here. I have a lot of great memories, and I left because there was tough considerations, with losing my mom and stuff like that. That was so long ago. My sister got old enough to start having kids, and her family was growing, and we don't have a ton of family that's still around on our side. So I wanted to be present. And, the book, the place he's from, which is Ocean City, the protagonist, it develops him as a person. And I think that throughout the book, you see him struggle with specific things, internal questions, and where he needs to be or where he's supposed to be, or even the whole theme of the book, is kind of really dictated by this internal strife that began here. Being that it's sort of an odyssey, you see, I try to really represent those decisions on the page, not internally, but him taking action to move towards a specific angle. Ocean City is a really unique place. It was far more unique when I was growing up. And anyone will say that. That sounds trite, but it's become much more developed. There's way more corporate.
Coming here my whole life, it's way different now than it is
the way it was when I grew up. I tried really hard to, through the book, imagine like, hey, what did it used to look like when I was a kid? It was far more of a liminal space, especially in the off season. There were so few people that lived here, and it's kind of a thought experiment. Like, what would it be like if this place was empty? If you couldn't pursue beach replenishment anymore? If the seawalls came down eventually through erosion, weather, time, salt water, wind, all these things that would put this little sandbar predominantly underwater in 20 years if we stopped with the upkeep and the maintenance. And it almost made the town like a character, because it's once again, there's so few people that have lived here from birth. A lot of people leave or people have moved here from somewhere else. But even still today, you have to really be conscious of, oh, was this person born here? Not to be an elitist or like say they have any less claim to be here, but just being born here, growing up here in the off season and on season, when you realize that like, man, this town goes from having so many people in it in the summertime to so few. And a lot of those people that come here in the summer end up being close friends, at least for me. And then they go away, right? It's almost kind of lonely.
Single serving friends.
Yeah, exactly. And that does something to a kid, especially, at least for me mentally, to go through that dichotomy year in and year out, from summer to spring, it's so dead. There's nothing going on. And that really stands out in my memory. So when it came down to describing this place through his projections and his anticipation of being there to actually being there, which you'll get to, it was important to me to consider growing up here, the people I grew up with, the people I spent the most time with and really developed as an adult, as a young man. That was absolutely a consideration. Just when it came down to making decisions about how something's described or what it was important to me to include, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And when I lived in Salisbury, obviously, for a couple of years and dated someone here in Ocean City. So being around in the winter, I lived in Atlantic City during the winter too, which is comparable.
Yeah.
Probably even a bit more depressing.
Yeah, it's not.
Because you have all the winning and losing of the casino and the bright lights, but like the cold wind coming off the ocean. And I mean, for me, obviously, I was very much in the underworld up there. But here, I realized it's like all there is to do in the winter is just drink.
Yeah. And that's
if
where
you don't go to Puerto Rico, you're here in a locals bar drinking.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And that's where, it goes back to what we were just talking about. Especially when I was growing up, that was the case, right? And now it's really interesting because now there's things to do, right? There's more people living here. They work remotely. People are going to take jiu-jitsu and going to, golf, or they're going to, there's more going on. There's definitely more offerings, which once again, it's not a bad thing, but it has an effect on the outcome of the individual psyche here. Because so many of my family members, friends were drunks, and that eats some people up. It's a combination of that weird seasonal, I don't want to say seasonal depression, but like just the effect.
It's real down here, though.
The effect that has on you as the year changes, and like now it gets darker earlier, and if you don't really have a plan, it can get on top of you. And I think that it still happens, but you look at people that really fought the good fight. They've been bartending 30 years here, things like that have been able to like keep their shit together. And that's impressive, and a lot of those people haven't done it consecutively. Some of them go to Costa Rica, or Puerto Rico. They move around. It is an interesting place. I think any beach town is weird in general, not just Ocean City. I think the Delmarva Peninsula is specifically strange. We have all these weird mixed cultures. It's not even outside of the U.S., but like, Delaware's here, Maryland's here, Virginia's here. You have different laws. You have this weird amalgamation of local culture that kind of...
The local cops are all assholes no matter where you're at.
Yeah, there's a weird convolution of things happening in this part of the country. And it's got to have a substantial effect on how people grow up, how they develop, especially if they've grown up and stayed here. It's got to be even crazier for someone that didn't grow up here. They grew up in Montgomery County or Pennsylvania, somewhere that's a bit more municipal, and they come here, and it's not so much anymore, but in the 90s, as late as the 90s, it was lawless in the off season. There's eight law enforcement officers on patrol in Ocean City at any given time, and now you got like 200. It's like,
and they got nothing to do.
Nothing. So it's not even just that, but just the way people behaved. You know, they had nothing to do. A lot of people go on unemployment, or they would have money saved throughout the summer. They just work 24/7 all summer, or they would get out of town. But there's nothing to go do. A lot of businesses close. A lot of the things people would run out and do to entertain themselves aren't available to them anymore. So yeah, they end up drinking, or they end up doing other things, or, you know, just getting into trouble. And that's how you know, when you think about where you grew up, you know, I think what you think about the most is all the important people in your life, the people that helped you to develop as a person. But then the second thing you think about is all like the hardships for you and your friends, or the crazy shit you heard about people doing in that area. Or remember that time so-and-so did XYZ. Damn, that was crazy. I think that most people consider those types of things when they think about where it is they're from, or what it is they were doing at that time in their life. Formidable years, you know, developmental years, high school, things like that. Or right after, which is kind of a no man's land for a lot of people, unless they got out of town and went to college. But college is its own weird little bubble too. So it's, you know, when I first left here, I moved to Vegas, which was strangely felt like home, because it is a tourist town, just like here.
Right.
It was smaller than you'd imagine. Everyone I met knew someone else I had already met. You know, it was a tight-knit town, and it felt comfortable for that reason. I still love it there. But it was weird because I felt like it was going to be this huge leap into something totally new.
I remember.
And it didn't feel like it.
I remember talking with you and Will about when you were getting ready to go, like at the end of the summer or whatever. And I remember thinking to myself, like, Las Vegas, going to be piercing out in Las Vegas. This fool's about to be on TV. But to touch on what you were talking about, how growing up, right, seeing people when they would come down in the summer and stuff like that, and then they leave, or you make new friends that are here for a week and then they're gone. It's like, from the other side perspective of that, like, we used to come down around Easter. We'd come down beginning of the summer. I'd do, you know, teenage years, I'd get, anytime somebody was going to OC, throw me in the car, I'm coming.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, people like you were a staple for me. It was like, oh, I can't wait. All winter, it's like, oh, I can't wait to go to the fucking skate shop. I'm going to go pop in on Cheyne. I'm going to go pop in on Will. I'm going to go see fucking American Dan. Yeah. I'm going to go to Cloud Break and see Jason and Brian Mack. You know, I'm going to fuck around up there. Like, I remember being like 15, staying at Sandpiper Dunes right across from Cloud Break. We get there, it's raining, showing up. We're all going out to dinner in like 2 hours. I throw my shit down immediately, run across the street. They're like, why are you going to the skate park? It's raining. They're not doing anything. I was like,
yeah.
And dude, and I remember Brian was fucking sitting there and he was pumped to see me, and we were just chopping it up, and his man came in. I forget the guy's name. That dude is fucking crazy. He became like a state trooper and like ended up crashing his car drunk at like a drive-through or doing some wild shit. I wish I remembered his name, but
you remember telling me, I probably know who it is.
Probably. But he came in with a big ass bag of weed, and fuck, I'll never forget, Brian Mack wrote a "back in 10 minutes" sign for the door with a little weed leaf on it. Taped up in the window. We went out to the car out back, and we're like blowing weed out of this fucking acrylic bong. Those were the jam back in 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
You know, and I went to this fucking dinner so high, and it was just such a, it was like, I just remember smoking and just being in the back of this car, like with some older dudes that were like my OC buddies, and really feeling a part of, and like feeling like I was a part of like Ocean City culture.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Cloudbreak was big for OC back in the day.
Yeah. And the original owners who Brian and Jason worked for, Woody.
Yeah,
Bongo.
fucking Woody.
Yeah, Woody and Bongo, man. They both moved to Australia. They're really close to my mom, and they're always so cool, man. They did like really just shit that I think about now. I'm like, damn, that's crazy. Like, they used to do skate demos for pro teams all the time. And I remember before they had that park out back, they had a mini ramp only. Actually, no. At this point, they didn't even have the mini ramp. They had this giant kicker ramp that was just a flat angle that they would put in the street. Like, it was still like gravel behind the shop. And they would have bands play right out back of the shop facing the bay. And they had the Birdhouse team come do a demo. And amongst all these crazy skaters that were there. Bucky Lassick was there. Tony Hawk was there. And I'll never forget Dana Helmet's band, the GLG 20s. They were like a ska punk band. Were playing.
That sounds like a ska punk.
Yeah. God, we're talking like 96. And they had the kicker in the street, and the demo was just these pro skaters riding on this rough ass pavement, hitting this like 4-foot tall kicker ramp and just doing what they could off of it. And Tony rolled his ankle, like fucked his ankle up. I remember. And I was real tight with Woody and Bongo, like a lot of people were. But, he knew my mom, he knew my dad, they knew my mom and dad. So I remember going inside to ask them about something, like they had drinks or something in there. I'm 13 years old.
Right.
And I go inside. Tony had rolled his ankle. They have him in the front, like, display of the shop. It wasn't even part of the store. You had to, like, kind of kneel, duck down to get into it. And they had him sitting in there because the shop was so packed. And they had him in there, and they had this huge bag of ice on his ankle, and he just looked miserable. I'll never forget the look on his face. And meanwhile, a lady from the condo association across the street is just standing there over Woody and Jeff and Tony Hawk. Well, I'm pretty sure she had no idea who he was. Just yelling at them about the band playing. She was so angry. And Tony's face was just like, oh my God, please just leave me alone. And yeah, I'll never forget that shit because it, a lot of that sort of stuff would happen down here. Weird happenings that you wouldn't consider. And it's surf and skate culture. I always describe Ocean City as a surf ghetto. That's what it was when I was growing up, man. You had these weird, no one's like, and we didn't have people like living in the streets then. We do now. But it was so shut down, so reduced in the off season. And the stimulation for the economy here was predicated entirely upon tourism. So when that stopped, man, the quick money for people, the bar backing money, the bartending money, when that went away, they had unemployment, maybe, if they were reporting taxes, if they were getting paid an hourly, but they might have just had to rely upon saving. And a lot of them might not have been able to do that. I'll never forget just like people hunkering down in the winter and there wasn't much going on. But then when those sorts of things happened, it was like Christmas, the Birdhouse team came to skate. Bam Margera skating at Cloud Break. There's a crazy demo at the skate park. So when Dew Tour happened, I'm like, I watched Tony Hawk break his ankle on 62nd Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a wild story, It's like not all this security.
My mom,
that shit was punk rock,
My mom talks about being in, going to college at Salisbury and then in the summer living in OC. And she was like apparently a little ramp tramp hanging out at the Ocean Bowl.
Oh yeah, probably.
And
I knew my dad.
And there's like pictures of her in front of Ocean Bowl. Hilarious, dude. Like in like the 80s or whatever.
The original one when it was still blue.
Yeah,
I skated there.
And it was there's so many like just even sitting here talking about how things used to be. Even for me in the beginning of the 2000s, it's a total like when I was first really able to start causing hell. Like, dude, I remember the first time I got pierced at Dimensions, because it was like years of like, come on, Dan, come on, and being like, no, Elliot, come back when you're 18, and I'm like, Dan, I'm 18, and that shit was important, dude. Coming to Ocean City, living in Maryland was like you look forward to it all year.
Yeah, and Dimensions, you think about it, that's such a crazy institution because before Dan even had it, and has really like ushered it into where it is now for so many years.
And Chat Street was right around the corner.
Yeah, before Dan owned it, it was still Dimensions. And this guy Kent Weymouth owned it, and Kent worked for my grandfather at Atlantic Skates. He was a major hitter in skate culture, and he that shop was important for a long time. And it still is. And I think to have an institution that represents some aspect of counterculture, especially now, so far south on the boardwalk, where Rita's and like all these corporate offerings are, once again, not to be mean about corporations, I like Chipotle, but it stands out. It didn't used to, but now it feels profound because it's still this weird presence that's been able to survive and kind of lope along into the future where rent is out of control. It's so expensive to exist there. You can't even get a license to offer body piercing or anything like that on the boardwalk south of North Division now, unless you were grandfathered in, like when they changed the laws, which was a long time ago. So the fact that he's stuck it out and that place has remained there as long as they have, I hope it's there forever, man. It's important in terms of OC culture, regardless of how you feel about piercing or whatever. It's, to have a representative of skate culture stay there for as long as they have, I think that's valuable. I love it.
Well, obviously that's an industry that's close to your heart. Doesn't your dad own like a skateboard company?
Brand X, Ripstick, Toxic Skates, Truitt Skates. Yeah, go buy some skateboards. Yeah, but they're killing it, and they sell a lot of wall hangers. They have a pro team and they sell pop decks, like popsicle decks, and they have a lot of crazy talented skateboarders. Tibbs Paris, arguably like the best professional longboarder on the planet. Kid Koa, who's insane. He's like, I met him. I thought I was like, are you 11 years old? And I'd see videos of this kid like hitting the mega ramp and stuff.
Oh, dude, who's my guy? One of the best pros out there right now, Ocean City, little skate grom, Roman Popovich or whatever his name is. Dude, I follow him on Instagram, and I'm like, I remember when you were 11. And
he's so crazy to see.
He's like a Tony Trujillo. I mean, just hitting the biggest ramps, doing just like wild shit, and is the 100% the product of like punk rock parents that support the shit out of what their kids do. It's like they took that kid to the skate park every day.
Which is the beautiful side about a place like this, right? Parents grow up doing it, then their kids are interested, And it's so rare, right? That a kid is like, what my dad's doing is cool. You know what I'm saying? That's a rare thing. So and you see it a lot here. You see dads that surf, that skate, moms that surf, skate. They bring their kids up, learning how to do that, not to be afraid of it, to kind of go for it. I think that's awesome.
Well, I mean, for me, obviously, that's right where I'm at with it. Do you know how awesome it is when like my kids are riding their skateboards and like the neighbor kids are like riding them with them, and they're like, my dad could do tricks on a skateboard, and they're like, damn. And I come out and I like will do a couple like kick flips or 360 flip, whatever, and they're like all like, and I think about when I was a kid, like that shit was magical. Like I remember being like 11, getting my first skateboard, and BJ Morgan, I'll never forget it. He was friends with my neighbor, and they were like 3 or 4 years older than me, and they were smoking weed, skateboarding, and fucking Mike Russo, and they'd be just like fucking kickflipping over the deck that was on the side, and I just was like, as soon as me and my homie started like really skateboarding, they took us under their wing. It's like that shit is so important.
It is, man. Yeah, I had friends like that. Yeah, Dave Munch, rest in peace, man. Dave Munch was so important. I always say he has a bench on the boardwalk for him. I'm like, he should have a statue somewhere. Like he was like a figurehead for me in Ocean City for like modern skateboarding, like flat ground trick riding, and when I was super young, living on 112th Street, I met him and John Edwards. They were best buddies. They were at my house having dinner all the time, and I'd go skate with them. I remember Dave had a cast on for like 2 years, just constantly wore a cast. And then you see skaters like him and another guy I saw the other day, Mike Bucksbaum, who unreal, man. Like they were so good, and you're 13, 14 years old, and you're watching dudes like tray flip 4 boards stacked up and stuff like that, and you're like, I never got that good at skateboarding. I always just did it because it was fun,
Right.
I could never really do anything crazy, but I could get around in a bowl and stuff like that, and I had a blast. It was only after I like started piercing that I was like, man, I really can't do this anymore. I was like, if I get hurt, like I'm out of work. So it was a constant for me for my entire adolescence, early adulthood, and I actually have where is it? Hold on. My dad just gave me this.
Yeah, I think about, oh, damn, that's fucking sick.
The old school deck. Acid Rain. Toxic. Original design. What you know about that? Yeah. Love it, man.
I'll tell you some good shape to it.
Yeah, it's got the old school.
You guys ever get any bulldogs to ride on that? That's what you need, is a bulldog to ride on it.
We need like a Chihuahua ride.
Yeah. I don't know if a Chihuahua could push that.
I'll push them.
Put Lucy and Carla Jean on there.
Exactly. They could just get one behind the other, and we'll send them down the road, get to the top of a hill, just put them on. Just be like, why have you forsaken me? You got to put on Do Not Disturb.
I did, but she hit the notify anyway, double called. To be fair, she has a reason. Charlie I think, might have a staph infection. I'm not sure. But, just given we do jiu-jitsu all the fucking time, and I just took over doing 2 kids classes.
Dude, Evan does that too. We were just talking about it earlier.
So there was like a bunch of gym drama, and one of the owners left and took a bunch of like all the kids coaches with him, and he kind of did things, if I had to give an opinion, in a less than reputable business manner that I would. But, hey, it's not my place. I'm just there to fucking train, and my kids train.
That's so cool you took on the classes, though.
Yeah, well, it's like they love when I train, like when I help them train and like coach them, and all the other kids fucking love me too, because I love to throw them around.
Yeah.
And, I take it, we have a lot of fun. It's exhausting, it's like, but I'm pretty used to it because I have 3 kids, and it's like I'm already at max overstimulation. So like there's really not much difference between 3 or 30.
Yeah, I get that.
And, but they, they were like, hey, if you take these classes, like we'll get rid of your membership dues. I was like, perfect. So save myself a few $100, and for me, it's also like it's an opportunity for me to continue to help build the culture up there, and like set an example for my kids, because we ain't going anywhere. It's too close. It makes too much sense. When to get back on Vegas. So the cool thing about your piercing career is that it's something you can do anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool. That was never lost on me. I was always really grateful that I could kind of be interested in a place and go find work. And Vegas was a test for that, like, and I didn't have a job lined up. Like when I moved, I had a place to live, and that was it. Like I didn't have any other thing worked out. So when I got there, I went to this shop and just, hey, you guys are probably staffed up, but I'm a piercer for a few years now, and I shipped all my things. They'll be here in like 5 days, but my portfolio's in there. Still, it wasn't online yet. You still have like a physical. And they're like, I was like, I can bring it in, if you guys ever need coverage, if someone's traveling or sick or something. I moved into a house right down the street because everyone told me that was the spot to go. So I went there first. And then me and Will, who would move with me, Will Churchburner, we went to like buy some stuff for the new house. And this is 2-3 hours later. And I get a phone call from the piercer at that shop that was like, hey, you're hired. Hadn't seen my portfolio, nothing. Just knew that I was talking to him in such a way. He was like, oh, okay, he knows what he's talking about.
Right. Which there is a way to know what you're talking about, like, especially in the piercing and tattoo.
For sure. So I started there, and I didn't work there that long, probably about 5 months. The kid I worked with was tough to get along with. Not just me, but a lot of people. Ended up working at the Bellagio for like another 6 months. My buddy Chris Haraway got me a job as like a pit clerk, which you don't know if they're there, but you see them when you're in a casino. They sit down and they do like data entry in the middle of the pit.
Yeah.
And you work this job. This is 24/7. Someone's doing this, so they have shifts. And it was cool working at the Bellagio. I got to eat a lot of free food. But then I ended up going to work for Mario Barth at the tattoo shop he opened in Mandalay Bay. And after that, I ended up going to work for Hart and Huntington at the Palms. And I was there I was in Vegas almost 6 years, something like that. So when I left, I didn't even have a place to live yet. I didn't know where I was going. I ended up working for a jewelry company with my buddy Steve Truitt, who I'm not related to, and he's a piercer. Ended up being a really good buddy of mine. But we traveled and sold jewelry, and I ended up doing some guest spots at a bunch of shops. They were in cities I was potentially interested in moving to. And ended up moving to San Antonio, Texas to work at the shop called Dandyland. It was awesome. And when I left there, I left because my best friends, Will, again, and Mike Morris at the time were going to move to Oakland, California with Tyler Rumberg. Mike had been living out there already for a little while and was moving into a new place and was like, hey, the place is bigger. If you and Will want to move out here, now's a good time. So Will and I took that seriously. We were like, okay, Will was still living in Vegas. And we met up back here in Ocean City, stayed for a couple weeks, and then we drove out to Oakland. Ended up staying there for a while as well. And I worked for a jewelry company there, a piercing shop. And once again, it was cool. I didn't have a job lined up. I was just like, well, there's a lot of piercing shops in San Francisco and Oakland. I'll find something. And I did right away. Even before I got there, my friend Tatiana got me a job at Tawapa Jewelry. I was there for a while, and I got a job at this piercing shop in Antioch, California, which is like far end of the Bay Area rapid transit system. And then got offered a job in Orlando, which sucked. And I went to work there for a while, and then ended up going to work at Jinx Proof in DC for almost 5 years, and then moved to Baltimore and worked at Saints and Sinners on Thames Street. Both of these shops are two of my favorite places in the world. I love them so much. But I worked at Saints and Sinners for almost 8 years. So I was there a long time. I love Baltimore.
As far as like the actual like skill of piercing, where do you think you learned the most? Like at a certain point, is it just like it's all the same, or like
it's an interesting question. You could argue that Ocean City was great, right? Because
the volume alone.
Yeah, even in high-end shops, you're not doing that much. You might do 10 on a really busy day, maybe 20 on a super busy day. And that's great, especially in shops where you're selling nicer jewelry and you're making an exponential jump from what you'd be making in a street shop, like a boardwalk shop. But even if you're working with like, I don't want to say subpar, but like middle of the road jewelry, not like real high end, and you're pricing competitively, to be doing 70 to 110 piercings in a day on a really busy day, that's experience that you're not going to replace in a major city. Having all that foot traffic walking by is valuable and these are people that don't really care.
Yeah.
Not to say that we didn't take it seriously, but you had some room to kind of be in a learning space,
Right.
So that was, invaluable. But to have all that experience and the confidence of doing that much, and then getting to work with someone like Steve Truitt or Miro in Texas, or companies like Tawapa to do guest spots at shops like Infinite, really valuable shops in terms of piercing, where these people have decades of experience at the highest level, which it's piercing, right? People are going to be like, what do you mean? Well, it's like, it's just a piercing. But these people have really taken it that far. There's, the Association of Professional Body Piercers. They have conventions. They teach courses. There's certifications synonymous with their recognition, and it's difficult to obtain them. Your shop has to be very specifically set up, have very specific standards of cleanliness, equipment usage, the type of jewelry you're using, and the courses they offer are expansive. They have so many different learning languages for people that are working in communities where the language might not predominantly be English if they were born in America and they pierce here, or, just learning how to maintain an autoclave or a statum, or how to make jewelry, how to recognize and identify types of jewelry, materials, metallurgy, like all these things are hyper important. Aftercare, healing, method, technique. So they really break it down and try to make adjustments and really turn the knobs on like how to be the absolute best version of this. Even if it feels like a superfluous additive to tattooing, which is what it feels like to a lot of people, So to have all the experience from working in a beach shop in Ocean City, and then get to work with Steve Truitt, with Sean Phillips, with real intense piercers that at that point had been piercing 15, 20 years. And I'm coming into it with 6, 7 years of experience at that point, 4 to 5. Then I was really set up to absorb what they were trying to tell me, right? Because I wasn't so in the pocket when I was doing it. I wasn't really overthinking things. I was comfortable, and I could make adjustments on the fly a lot faster with good, positive influence in my ear, giving me valuable advice. So it's kind of on both sides. I learned a lot in Vegas, and traveling. Dandyland was another big learning spot for me. Working with Mira there was a real intense learning experience. And then Steve was coming in and out doing guest spots, doing like heavy modification work, a lot of which I learned and offered for a long time. So to get to watch him kind of do that extracurricular stuff in terms of body modification and get an opportunity to try my hand at it and even get kind of busy offering some of that stuff like scarification for a long time was rewarding because it was different. I'd been doing the same thing now for 11, 12 years. So it was fun to add that texture to what I was doing, to spend more time with clients for a couple hours rather than just like, boop, you're pierced, see you later. So that was interesting. But yeah, all in all, I always tried to stay on the up. And if there's a better way to be doing something, even if I've been doing it the same way for 16 years, I wanted to know that better way. I wanted to buy better jewelry. I wanted to offer better things because and now I don't even wear piercings. I'm heavily tattooed, but even not wearing that many, it came from motorcycles and the times that I did roll jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai or anything like that where, it would make sense to have it.
That's all mine.
I wanted it to be, I really cared about it because like you said, it afforded me the opportunity to live anywhere I wanted, which I think is the secret to anybody being a well-rounded person. Not to say that you're less than if you stay where you grew up, but man, if you can get up and get the fuck out for a while and acclimate to a different city, to a different country, to meet new people, to make new friends, to work different jobs, to have a tough time, do it. It'll make you a more interesting person, but it'll make you much more resilient. And I really value that. I'm like, tell my wife all the time, I'm like, one day we could retire to Argentina or go somewhere else. Like, we don't have to be here. And that doesn't feel super crazy to me. It feels like hall pass, because I have this mitigated hurdle to get over that I think people that haven't had the opportunity to move or might not be super prepared for it might have a more difficult time with changing their environment up and figuring something new out, setting themselves back in exchange for these new experiences in this new place. You know what I'm saying?
100%, man. I mean, that's my whole life, it was like once I was like getting high, then it was like, okay, how can I run from where I'm at? Because where I'm at, I'm not living a life that's fucking, I'm too hot.
Yeah, you're not interested
I gotta
anymore.
get the fuck out of here. And it was like I went to Atlantic City, was there for a little while, came back, shit was still super hot. Was going to go back to Atlantic City, but then was like, ended up going to Philly to hang out with my dad. He was up there for a job. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll just stay here. Stayed in Philly for a while. Ended up getting kicked out of the house that I was living at for fucking shooting dope. Ended up just like crashing on the street, living under this bridge right down in like South Philly.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I would crash at like this punk squat house. That dude, I mean,
so
like,
many of those in Oakland.
So it's like, while it was definitely one of the most difficult times, like I was definitely a dog on the leash of a dope addiction, I used that time. There was a sick freedom that I had. And like literally my day would pretty much be like, I'd wake up, I'd always make sure I had one for the morning, so I could like get moving, I slept under this bridge. Your phone just died? That's all right. You can, I was gonna say, I can get a charger out of my car. I have a 6-foot cable. Oh, all right. Well, I'll just keep it right here. What I could do.
And we're back.
And we're back. Yeah. Oh, let me, I guess I can just take my headphones out now.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, now it's good to go. And now we're back.
I know I was actually about to go for a topic switch, but first, what I was going to ask, what is your favorite and least favorite piercings to do?
Oh shit. Okay, man. Well, I like doing anything that looked cool. So, I mean, in terms of favorite, it depended on what they wanted to put in, like the jewelry, and if they had the body type for it. Not to say people's bodies are less than or more than, but yeah, sometimes you have an anatomy that's set up. Certain piercings are going to look better than others.
It's like tattoo placement. Like you want to put a certain shape of tattoo that fits the space you're putting in.
Exactly.
Which I only know that because I hung around a tattoo shop.
I would say the hardest thing to do well, some piercers out there might be like, you're an idiot, you're a hack. But I don't believe that to be true. A matching pair of earlobes is relatively easy, and after you've been doing it long enough, it's fine. But the consideration you have to make is that everyone's ears are different. It's the first thing you see in terms of piercings for a lot of people. Right. And there's so many axes on which you can get it wrong. It has to be this perfect mirroring. And the same goes for like matching anything, nostrils, lips, whatever. But they're so far apart, right? You're looking at independent sides of the head.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people will measure and use calipers and do all these things. And I found it to be best to just kind of really look at the relative anatomy around it. Where's their tragus or their antitragus? How does it sit in relation to that, the floor of the earlobe? And go from there. Challenging things or big projects were always really fun. Anytime someone came in that wanted something that I would say was like kind of crazy, like large gauge or you know, if I got to punch conches.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Stuff like that was always really satisfying to do. It looked cool, it looked crazy. You know, people were always a little more nervous for that sort of thing. And then when it was done, they were hyped because it looks wild, you know? And it has a wild effect. I remember when I got mine done, and I got them done by arguably the best piercer on the planet.
Did you have your ears gauged out?
Yeah. I had my conches punched and my ears stretched, and I had like matching jewelry in both.
How big were your? I do remember you.
They never got that big, like half inch.
Half
inch. I think 3/4 of an inch maybe at one point, but it's been so many years since I've worn anything in them.
I got to an inch, and then at one point, like, tore my ear putting some back in. I had like a floppy piece of raw bacon holding my ear together, and I was
now you get them.
Yeah, it's like two totally different ears now. But I actually got them sewn up when I lived here in Salisbury. That's when I ripped them. That was like a really sad day for me. You know, piercings definitely were an add-on for, you know, like before I really had connections to getting tattooed, before I was old enough to really get tattooed, you know, and it was like, but I just always liked it. I mean, I was actually just telling my children yesterday that we were, for some reason, I forget why, but I brought up the fact that I had pierced they were talking about getting their ears pierced. And, you know, I told them they can't get their ears pierced yet. And I was like, but, you know, when I was a teenager, I pierced my own lip. And they were like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I had a safety pin. You know, and I went to school the next day, and that shit was fucking swollen. I fucking got some jewelry from my homegirl. Like, I was good to go. And, yeah, that was, like, really the beginning. I mean, it was such a element of, like, rebelliousness. Yeah. It was definitely, like, a good starter, fuck you, mom and dad. Let them know, hey, the tattoos are coming.
Yeah, I was lucky to, my mom, if I wanted something like that after like 14, my mom was pretty cool about it. She'd be like, all right, well, if you're going to do it, let's do it the right way. I got my first piercings, my ears, I got my tongue pierced when I was like 15 at Dimensions by Kent and Richie. And then after my mom passed away and it came time to really put the pedal to the metal with learning, I just kind of went to Kent, who still owned it at the time. It was right before Dan bought it. And I was like, hey, man, I got to figure something out. You know, I didn't go to college. I have a high school diploma. Like, what do I do? He was like, you still want to pierce? I'm like, yep. And he, like, put me on game right away. And I was working a job. I didn't have anywhere to live at the time. I was, like, sleeping on the beach or, like, at a homie's house. And
back before they harassed you all the time about fucking sleeping on the beach.
Yeah. And I would finish work at Harrison's Harbor Watch running food, and I'd go right to Dimensions and watch them pierce, and I would clean tools, do all that. And at the end of the summer, like July, actually, I remember Kent very specifically like sat me down. He was like, hey, man, I'm really sorry. I'm selling Dimensions. And I was like, ugh, because I expected to work there.
Right.
And he was like, but American Dan's buying it from Swirl World. And I didn't really know Dan that well at that point. He was like, and I told him you're ready to go because he's going to need a piercer. So he wants to kind of take you under his wing now and bring you down there and start doing some stuff. And that's how it worked. And I got to say, Dan really took care of me, man. Like, he saw what I needed and swooped in and helped, man, with everything. He gave me a place to live, gave me a car to drive around, paid me super well. And I worked hard for him. And I worked on and off hard for him for a lot of years. And, you know, he was still a young business owner figuring out with crazy rent prices and trying to figure out how to just operate these two huge, very busy establishments on the boardwalk. And I'll never forget that. He made a difference for me. But yeah, it was, dimensions. I remember going to get my first stuff, and Brandon Helmuth getting his first tattoo when he turned 18, and we played music together. I was like 16. I was like, Mom, I want to get a tattoo. And she took me a month after my 16th birthday to Brandon's brother, Dana, who still tattoos.
I have tattoos by Dana.
Yeah, to get my first tattoo. Was pretty cool about that, Not a lot of parents are like, all right, especially then. We're like, it's 1998, 9.
Yeah.
They're like, all right.
It was still like a thing back then.
Yeah.
Like,
if I got tattooed, my school had like an issue. Like guidance counselor, like called my mom. It's a bit distracting for the other students. She was like, it's on his arm.
What was it?
It was a Sacred Heart that said mom.
Nice.
She was like, it's got to be a mom tattoo.
So my first tattoo, I was 16. I was playing in a band, the fucking hardest punk rock band fucking of the early 2000s, Kill Whitey. And we played with this band, The Screws. I don't know if you had ever heard of them, from DC. And I think I was at 930 Club seeing X and Rollins band with my mom. Yeah, and I saw the dude Mookie from The Screws. I was like, yo, you're from The Screws. He was like, yeah. I was like, we're friends on MySpace. It was like, cool. I was like, hey, I like your tattoos. He had like a fucking dancing tattoo.
I remember
on his
Mookie.
chest. Yeah, he had a dancing tattoo on his back or his chest.
He came to Jinx Proof and shit a couple times.
Yeah, and he is a character, and I'm about to tell you
I think I saw The Screws open for The Suspects.
For sure.
Okay, yeah.
And he was like, yo, take my number. He was like, I tattoo. I'll tattoo you on my spot. So we went to me, my buddy Chris, and this dude Marcus. Marcus was driving us. Marcus drove us down to like Northern Virginia, went to his apartment or whatever. It's like 11 a.m. when we get there. Opens up, this dude's wide awake. He's ready to go. So you guys want a beer or anything? Like, yes. So like me and my man are drinking beers. Marcus is not drinking beers. He's changing the songs all the time, changing gloves, changing the songs. It's a little interesting experience. We get tattooed. My man Chris is like, oh, I'm kind of tired. First tattoo, tired. He's like, you guys are tired? We got someone to wake you right up. Comes out with a tray of some chopped up powder. I've only done cocaine like 3 times in my life at this point. But in my mind, free cocaine. Who am I to? It's expensive. I'm not going to say anything, of course, I take a fucking rail. My man takes a rail. My man was brave enough to say something. He's like, that didn't taste like fucking Coke. Mookie looked at him, and the look on his face was like pure disgust. He said, Coke? That's for pussies who need sleep. This is crystal meth, bro. Speed. She'll have you up for 10 days straight eating pussy. My man was like, I don't think I want to be up for 10 days straight eating pussy. Yo, Marcus, the horrified, I wish I had a picture of the look on his face when he said, nah, it's speed, bro, crystal meth. Because Marcus looked like he was about to shit his pants. And so we were like, Marcus, why don't you go get the car warmed up? We're going to pay the man, handle the money, get out of here. Marcus goes to the car. Chris was like, maybe we should go. I was like, yeah. So we got a gram of the meth. 16. Just got my first tattoo. We get this meth. We're going to see Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. Get a bottle of Captain. We drink this Captain. We're like, Marcus, go get the tickets. Marcus goes to get the tickets. Fucking the second he's out of the car, fucking chopping this bag up. I didn't do this gram of meth. Go in. Star Wars was great. Went home. Thought I was gonna be like Coke. I'll get to sleep 4 or 5 in the morning. Get a couple Z's before I got to go work at Pizza Hut. Bro, I watched Caddyshack. Second time Caddyshack played through, I was like, well, guess I'm not going any sleep. Caddyshack a third time. And I was like, well, I'm just up now. Went to Pizza Hut. Fucking dude was like, just like sweating into pizzas next to a fucking oven for hours. My man was like, yo, did you sleep? I was like, fuck no. Yeah. He's like, you should have come over. I was like, you're right. He's like, can I get some pizza? I was like, yeah, come down. So he came down, fucking also still geeked up. I didn't get to sleep till like the next morning. Dude, that's like the only drug that I was like, no, I'm not into that. But that's my first tattoo experience, and I didn't have a chance to hide it. I didn't have a shirt on. My mom came in, it was right there. Yeah. But it was like a spider from my Uncle Johnny, who would call it Spider, so it was like good validity, how can you be mad? Yeah. And it was like covered up, so.
Damn, that's wild.
Yeah, that was my first tattoo experience.
Dude, the first time I ever ingested cannabis, I was getting tattooed. I won't say the name of the tattooer, but I'm getting this giant tattoo over the course of a few months. And I was getting tattooed like 2 or 3 days a week. I would go up and get tattooed for like 2 to 4 hours. And I was young, so it was a little easier. But
Way easier to get tattooed when you're young.
yeah, I remember one day I was in pain. I was like, damn, I'm fucking hurting. My aunt had dropped me off to get tattooed. I didn't have a car. I lived in West Oak. She worked in Salisbury. So I'd be like, drop me off on your way to work and get me when you're done. I just get tattooed and hang out at the shop all day.
Right.
I was like right down the street from her work. And it's probably like 2 hours before she's going to pick me up, and we're tattooing and we're just putting this black in, and it hurts really bad. And I was just over it. You know,
Yeah.
I was healing other spots on my back, and I was just like, dude, I'm done. Like,
No endorphins.
yeah, I've never tapped out up until that point. And I was like, I'm just tapping out, man. He's like, nah, man, you haven't eaten since like 2. Like, you're probably just hungry. Let's get a snack. He's like, my wife made brownies. You want some brownies? Some sugar oil. And I was like, all right. And his apprentice brings me this, like, he's like, go get a brownie for Shane. And he brings me like a quarter-sized piece of a brownie, like so small. I'm like, I guess there wasn't much left. And I eat it. And I'm like, you know, getting tattooed. After a while, I did feel a little better. I was like, all right, cool. Like, all right, I feel good. And the tattooer was like, how you feeling? I was like, I'm good, man. I feel way better. He's like, don't freak out, but there's weed in those brownies. I was like, what the fuck, bro? He was like, yeah, you're fine. You're fine. It's just a little bit. And I was like, all right. And I didn't say shit, but I remember feeling real high for the first time. And my aunt picked me up. And
Could you tell?
she's an addictions counselor. R.I.P. Aunt Lisa. But she picked me up. And she's like, how was your tattoo? I was like, they gave me a weed brownie, and I'm super high. Please take me to Arby's. It was like, let's go to Arby's. Shit, it was so funny.
Please take me to Arby's.
Please take me to Arby's now. She's like, all right, cool. And that was, yeah.
You got to think about what that meant to, like, our era, right? It's like there was no weed store to walk to. You're committing crimes.
100%.
Like, especially down here.
Like, you can't get, like, you don't know what's in it in terms of, like, terps and THCA.
It's some weed. You want weed? I got weed.
Yeah, it's like,
what flavor is it? Yeah. Is it KB or does it have seeds?
Yeah, it's KB or is it swag? It's like, all right, you know. I didn't even really smoke weed at all until, you remember, that I ate it that one time. And then what happened was, about a week later, I've probably told you this story. I was living with Will and Mike, and my buddy Chris Galloway, who's like one of my best buddies at the time, was managing the movie theater in West Oak. It wasn't Flagship then. It was like White Marlin movie theater. And anytime he got a new movie in, he'd be like, hey, I got X, Y, and Z in. Do you want to come watch it at midnight?
Oh, dude.
And it was the shit, right?
I had a friend who did that in Annapolis at the harbor, and they would get all, like, the smart people movies, too.
Yeah, dude. So he was like, 300. You know, it was like,
dude,
he was like, we got 300. We're going to watch it. Aren't you excited for that? And I was like, yeah. I was like, can I bring some friends? He was like, yeah. So my buddy Colin Scott, smoked a lot of weed with his girlfriend at the time, Courtney. And I called him. I was like, hey, 2 things. 1, I ate a weed brownie. I had a really good experience. I want to do it again. I was like, thing 2, my buddy's got 300 and we're going to watch it tomorrow night at midnight. If you want to go, maybe we can make these brownies and eat them and go see this crazy movie. And he was like, yeah, let's do it.
Theaters was so great.
Yeah. He's like, let's do it. So he comes over to the house with like a bag of weed, and we make these brownies. We make a sheet tray, 2 sheet trays with brownies. And I lived with Chris Gilliam, Will Heinzelman, and Dale Fields at that point, I think. Mike owned the house, but he lived back and forth between Virginia for his job. So Colin comes over, Chris is there, Will's there. We're all going to go see this movie. And Chris Galloway at the theater has friends coming too. So there's going to be like 20 of us there watching the movie. And I'm like, well, I really enjoyed this little bit. So I should eat a lot of it, like a huge amount, and I'll feel even better.
That shit is like tripping when you're not experienced.
Gnarly experience.
Yeah.
And I remember calling my grandmother from the bathroom, like mid-movie. I was like, oh, fuck, I ate a weed brownie. I'm freaking out. My mom had just died. She's all worried. I was fine, but she was like, called my aunt. She was like, your nephew's on drugs. So all upset. It was, I remember just being like, fuck, I'll never do that again. And literally after that, I didn't touch weed. So I was rapping. And I was on tour with the Juggalo group. And they all just gotten laced up with those like Granco pens. The G pens.
Yeah.
And I hit one on their tour bus.
Those things were a fucking mess.
Yeah, exactly. I remember hit one though and be like, "This is great."
It was great for the time, yeah.
And this is how
it was revolutionary.
Yeah, this is how I get the weed.
Yeah.
I remember we played Pittsburgh and it was a sold out show at this place called the Altar Bar. And that was like a 20-date tour, I think. And Mike came out as the tour manager, and I remember right before we went on stage in Pittsburgh, Matt would go out first, the drums, and he would like get the crowd going and get started. And then I would go out like as the song started. So I'm waiting with the microphone, and Chief, the guy that did stage sound for the group that we were on tour with, Twisted.
You were on tour with Twisted?
Yeah.
I know Twisted.
Yeah, so his name was Chief.
Bags. That song about that weed song is my shit. Ain't no shame in my Juggalo game.
I did a lot of rap tours with like, what pop culture would consider cool and some shit that pop culture would be like, whatever. Man, that was the most professional tour that I ever went on. Like, they took such good care of us. They were incredibly punctual. They were just cool, man. They were cool to tour with. They always made sure we had hotel rooms and shit, like at no cost to us. If I had business questions, their manager always took my calls, like for years after. So I'm about to go on stage. The intro was playing, and I got like 30 seconds. And Chief always had a pen. He's like, "You want to hit the pen before you go out?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he had this bigger motherfucker, different wax. I was hitting this other guy's pen. So I hit the pen real hard, and I go out on stage, and I realize, like, as I'm beginning the song,
that was too big of a hit.
So high. Sold out crowd.
That's a big Juggalo town.
1,800 people. Packed. All the way up the stairs, the balcony, like, it's crazy, and I am violently high.
Yeah.
Like, I hit the stage, I'm like, fuck, I'm way too high. And it was so funny, because we did the set, we get off stage, and Matt's like, "I don't know what you did tonight, but you were fucking great. You were killing it." Thank God, man, because I was not playing. And then I went back to Baltimore. I had a homie that could get, like, shitty BHO, then started smoking flower, and then within like 2 years, I had like a full blown problem.
I remember it was like pretty much exclusively dabs at a certain point
for the entire second half.
Just
dabs. I'd be like, "You want to come over and dab a gram of?"
Yeah, I mean, it was, dude, it was great like that, because like I didn't talk to you for like you went on all your travels, and then like I randomly talked to you, and I was like, shit, you're literally 5 minutes from me.
Yep.
In fucking I was in over near Patterson Park, and fucking you're right there at the Poe House.
And then you were right down in Fells.
And then I was down in Fells, like literally
that little,
down the street.
Alley Street. What was it called?
Dallas,
yeah.
Right.
The opposite side of Broadway was Register. It
was
right. A mirrored street.
Like 2 blocks over from fucking Tattoo Museum.
Yep.
Actually, no, it came out to the Tattoo Museum.
And I lived like right near you in a bunch of spots. Like I lived.
Yeah, then you moved right over there. Yeah.
And then on Alisana and Bond, and that's when we were riding bikes all the time.
Right. And dude, I mean, it was like when I realized you were in Baltimore, it was such a great time. Yeah. It was like all this stuff's going on, constantly fucking doing psychedelics. Just like I was getting ready to have a kid.
Now you got 3.
Now I have 3. It's and it's like just such all the motorcycle time where we were just fucking running around Baltimore, and and then you moved back. You're like, I think I'm moving back to Ocean City, and it was just like, I was like so thankful, because I'm like, oh, thank God, get this guy the fuck out of here, because like you were just at a point where you needed to fucking
I needed a change. I feel like now I could live back there again, and I think it wasn't necessarily,
for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily Baltimore.
No, it was just you were at a phase. Your mental was in a totally different state.
Yeah,
and like.
I talk about it all the time with my wife. I'm like, man.
I mean, and it was almost like the first time I came to see you, it was like COVID, and I came and stayed with you and we watched The Gentleman.
Yeah.
Yeah, phenomenal. And, I was like, man, Shane's like doing great down
here.
Yeah. Like I could tell it was just like everything. It was like you were super depressed, like you were just ready to get the fuck. Like Baltimore was like just over it.
There's too many bad things happen back to back, and just normal.
For sure.
Shit. And
there's also an intrinsic stress, I think, living in the city versus like, where I'm at now, and like where we're at. Dude, it's like
you gotta be on all the time.
Yeah.
You have to constantly be like, what's going on?
When I was at the old clubhouse, I mean, just being in that neighborhood, it's like, you're right near chaos at any block.
That was near Remington, right?
Yeah, it was more what's right over.
It's like off north
by Greenmount, in between Greenmount and fucking, Calvert. It's like fucking chaos right over there.
Yeah.
I mean, I got carjacked in the beginning of 2020 over there. It wasn't even my fucking car. And there was a cop at the end of the fucking street.
And they won't get.
And it was right under a fucking City Watch.
Yeah.
You know, like, and then when I, you know, it wasn't even my car, it was my buddy's car. So I, you know, was like, okay, I guess he needs, like, for insurance, so I should probably report this. Because I didn't even have insurance. So
Yeah.
I wasted my night. But, like, the cop that had to come in on his Sunday night was, like, acting almost like it was like I was trying to do that. I'm like, motherfucker, I just had a gun
In my face.
Yeah, like, what are we talking about here?
Well, dude, I had kids run up on me a few times, and it's, you know, by the second time that happens, you're just like, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Here's this, here's this.
Yeah.
You almost like carry a couple hundred cash on you just so you can be like, here you go.
Yeah.
Are you happy now? Please leave. Right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to hand over everything.
Well, it was crazy. I had, like, 2 bands in my pocket, like, in my jacket pocket. And, like, what had happened was, like, I was on kind of a side street, and it was wet in this. I was in a truck that didn't have, like, 4-wheel drive. So, like, Barclay is the neighborhood. That's the neighborhood I was thinking of. I, like, literally was, like, coming to a stop, and this car basically pulled in, turned, and was going to turn on my street, but, like, it was like a quick little, you know, but I had to stop. They didn't have a stop. And so, like, when they went to turn, I slid into them. And, like, the one dude ran over and was like, what the fuck are you doing? We have guns in the car. Like, the one dude pulled a fucking gun out. I'm like, all right. Because at first they were, like, trying to punch me both in the doorway. And so they're like, get out of the car. I'm like, no, I'll give you the insurance. And then, like, the one dude pulled a gun out. I was like, all right, I'm out of the car. You know, they were kids. They're like 16. The car was probably stolen. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
And the one dude starts trying to, like, pat me down. I, like, pull away. I'm like, no. I'm like, I don't have any money. Look at me. Do I look like I have any fucking money? You know, look at this piece of shit truck I'm in right now. He was like, yeah, it does look like you have any money. His man got in the car and drove off his car. And then he just took it. He was like, get in. And fucking with the gun. And, like, he got in the car and I just ran. Like, to the shop, because I was 4 blocks away. Fucking, I didn't even have my phone. I lost my phone. Dude, the craziest thing is, I called Sarah from, like, my iPad when I got home. And she was like, held up my wallet. And she was like, I got your wallet. I was like, well, how the fuck did you get that? She was like, I guess they threw it out of the car when they carjacked you. Because my friend was walking her dog, picked up the wallet, and I had
yours.
Yeah, it was like my ID, and I had my Lord Bongtimore LLC debit card in there. And her friend was like, yo, aren't you friends with this guy? And went and dropped it off to her. Because it was like, you know, she's living on 31st Street at the time.
Yeah.
And so it was right there. I was like, oh, thank God. At least I don't have to go to the MPA and, like, get a new license. All the card bullshit.
Yeah. No, I got to go to Baltimore soon. It's been too long.
But, you know, so then I was, like, on the bike, and, you know, then Audra left right when COVID happened in, like, March. So, like, I was just, like, traveling around when I didn't have the kids. And it was, like, gas was cheap, flights were cheap.
Oh, yeah.
You know, just rode out here. It was great. Awesome. I was thinking about, I remember that ride home, too, just, like, going, like, 100 miles an hour.
Remember your shock?
Yeah, yep.
Came off?
Dude, I passed that guy's, every time I passed by his, like, little turn where I would have to turn to go to his house, that's what I think of. I always think of that time.
Yeah, man.
You know?
And that guy Manny you met ended up being super important in my life.
Dude.
Sunset Cycles.
Yeah.
He rented our space to us. Like, he was so cool. He ended up being like a mentor. And he retired. Now he's in St. Augustine.
I mean, it's like, and you just found him from just being like, this is literally right around the corner. Let me check this out. Yeah.
I remember going over like, I just wanted to come over and meet you. And yeah, he was cool, man. He was a shit. I miss him. He's a ways away now. But yeah, that was a wild time.
Well, and, you know, and when you and Abby got together, it was like just everything all just seemed to start clicking.
Yeah.
You know, and like, it feels like light years away from like the mind state that you were in.
100%.
You know, before you moved back here, and like to have her having her business, and it's something that you just meshed so well into, and to get to see where y'all are at and how you got it set up, man, it's impressive.
It's been so crazy to go from like, because Abby was doing like in-home one-on-ones and driving to different houses all day, so she could only see so many people, and it really depended on where they were. Because she might spend an hour in the car.
Right.
I was like, you should get a place, and that's where Manny came in. He had the spot he was renting. From there, it just kind of kept building and building, and then we took the space over next to us, and then we were like, man, we need more space. We probably should live where we're working. Like, this is crazy.
Right.
I was leaving the house at 10 at night to go to work and do stuff, and it was just a lot. So it's crazy because, like, the influx of clients we've had, we've been so, Abby's just so good at what she does, and we've got great clients. it's literally required us to grow. Like, we haven't ever been like, how are we going to make this happen? It's like, how can we get what we need quick enough? Like, we have what we need to acquire it, but like, how do we make it happen in the most, like, in the smoothest possible way? Because it is, we're constantly working. If we're in a process where we have dogs here for training, we're on basically 24/7. We have to schedule in time off, like,
right.
And we haven't done that because we got the house, and that was a big undertaking and just required us to really be at work all the time. So now finally we're gonna take time off in February, which will be cool. But we're going to Iceland.
Well, and on the topic of travel, I've actually had a thought, and we got sidetracked. You were talking about how all the different places that you've lived and getting to go all these different spots and doing different things, and how it really was able to shape your perspective in a lot of ways. I think that we need to talk about another way that has shaped your perspective. Psychedelics, it's kind of the role they've had. Do you feel over the course of your life the role that they've had has changed, or like, because I feel like for me, I've liked certain things more than others at different phases of my life. Like, I used to like acid way more than mushrooms, but like for years now, it's like I almost exclusively eat mushrooms.
So for me, look in retrospect, now that I look back, and now I barely do them every few years.
It's hard to carve out that time to like.
Yes, and I used to just.
Yeah, you're just like, well, it's
not
2 o'clock. Fuck it, whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen.
At some point or another, and this is gonna sound so woo-woo, they just kind of presented themselves to me in a way that I felt really comfortable with the idea. There was enough people around me that I trusted in that way. And from my first real experience with them, with psychedelics in general, noticed, so hard to explain, there was an inherent momentum. It was like a voice in my ear. It was like, it could be schizophrenia. No, but it was like, this is good. You should keep doing this. And that was hard because I had a lot of people around me simultaneously that were like, this is bad. Don't do this. This is unhealthy. I was in therapy simultaneously. I was never like going to hurt myself. It was never like that. But,
right.
Uncomfortable and wanted to get better. I
remember like you being excited to start medication and try to find all sorts of different routes to
go in the right path to kind of get there. And I was really candid with my therapist about what I was doing. And
was there an impact of like, or anything like in taking medication and psychedelics? Like,
yeah, for sure. I would say they worked in tandem almost. A lot of people would be like, mixing those things is dangerous. And absolutely, mixing specific things with certain things is dangerous. But it was pretty pragmatic about talking to my doctor and, telling him my plans and what I wanted to do, what I was interested in doing, and just getting advice and feedback about whether or not that was smart.
Did you just come up with these things, or like just based on just randomly like having like saying, I think this way or this type of dosage, or this frequency?
So I thought about that a lot. Like I was really, like with anything, I get really interested in things.
Yeah.
And that was one of those things. And it was the culture that surrounded it that I was enamored with. But the really nice side effect was that I spent so many years so angry just about just the way my life had gone. Shit that was out of my control. Losing my mom and just losing relationships and just all these things. My relationship with myself, not being more self-confident. I was always, I don't want to say I wasn't self-confident, but I just didn't have a lot of drive to certain pursuits that I would have otherwise probably really benefited from.
I would say, even when I got here, there's just an aura of confidence value in that. And I've seen also, too, grow over the last few years. But, like, I would say at a point, that's what I would think is there was a self-confidence problem at a certain point.
Yeah, for sure.
And just, like, your whole thought process was, like, in any way looking for people around you to try to help bring you up, you know?
Yeah, and, that was... So, I think that through... being a psychonaut and kind of figuring out what certain things did and how I felt after, and trying to have a lot of intention and read a lot about, what's the word? Different, like, meditative leaders and people that were really into, like, internal...
Which I think anybody runs into that kind of, those type of questions and research at a certain point when you're it's like, well, how can I maximize this experience?
Yeah.
So at a certain point, it's like, I can't just keep doing this for fun.
Yeah, it's not about getting high
Yeah.
after a while. It's about like, okay, I noticed that, man, I was really, it's just going to sound like an oversimplification. I was really stressed about A, B, and C, right? And then I did a heroic dose of psychedelics and had a great experience with people I loved. And then all of a sudden, that weight was lifted, not while I was on the drug, post.
Yeah.
I carried it with me. And I noticed that. I was like, oh man, this is offering me different perspectives. It's disassembling these devices that I've built. They start to seem silly, like unhealthy things I was doing to myself. Not like self-harm or anything like that.
No.
Just internal
patterns
conversations
that you have in your brain.
Yeah, I was, it really started to feel unfair to myself. And it was highlighting that for me. It was like, oh, this thing that you were concerned with, or this opinion you had of yourself, or, this thing you did, or whatever, really isn't that important.
Right.
In the grand scheme of things, you're not that important, but in the healthiest way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, you're a part of a giant thing. And your individualism is important, but that should be lifted up by the fact that it's not. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're putting too much pressure on yourself. And I've been far more productive since those types of things were a part of my life. And God, I'll always have respect for them. Like, I can't be like, I'm atheist. I can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
I've said it for decades. Not anymore. Like, I can't tell you I know what's what, but I know that in my mind, I'm like, I've had enough experiences that there's science that's more complex that we'll never understand. That's gonna affect our lives on a day-to-day basis. And it kind of allows you an opportunity to really audit the presence of that in your life and focus on the appropriate things.
Right.
The hard way is often the right way to go. And it really kind of, that's why they're like, oh, you had a bad trip. It's like, well, there's no such thing. It really is a bad trip. There's difficult experiences for sure, but they're often the most valuable. And that's an important consideration to make. People are like, well, I'm scared of having a bad. I was like, no, what you're being given or offered is the opportunity to work through something that's really difficult in your day-to-day life or in your past. That you're being afforded an opportunity to really itemize and look at and go, how can I alter this or take it out of my life? It doesn't matter. It's not benefiting me. It's taxing me daily. How can I fix it? And when you're focused on those negative things that might make you uncomfortable otherwise, and you go into those experiences, it's for a reason. Usually you've got something on your mind. You've been going through a tough time. And I always found that if I was having a really hard time with something for weeks, days, months after, sometimes I was like, man, like the relief.
That tightening in your chest is like relieved.
Yeah, exactly. It makes a big difference. So, I'll never pretend to understand like exactly how those things work. I mean, there's tremendous amount of research, and there's been no shortage of academics and scientists and biologists and physicians, all these people that have really taken a close look at the world of psychedelics and made estimations about their effect on the human psyche or other living beings for that matter. I think there's something to be desired in life if you've never looked that sort of thing in the face. I think it's an adventure for sure. And it's definitely, it's a trip for a reason. It's so valuable to me in my past. And once again, it's not something I do now regularly, but it's been years. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't be where I'm at. Probably wouldn't have achieved a lot of what I have in the past decade if that wasn't a part of that 10-year span. You know what I'm saying? So when I look at it now and people talk to me about it or they have questions, because I'm candid about what I've done with them, with people, my family, people I know in my life, they're like, man.
And it's becoming much more socially acceptable.
Oh, 100%. Now every other person is like, this mushrooms. I'm like, okay, well, why don't you try dosing first?
Yeah. And then use that as like a supplementation.
Yeah, exactly.
But you need the full boom.
Yeah, you need to buy the ticket to the ride.
But there's an argument to be made that the microdose could be the gateway to get them more
comfortable with
the idea.
Yeah, it benefits you in a different way, especially.
But in my always for the longest time thought process has been, you need to at least eat like an eighth, 5 grams, and just go. Have a couple of your buddies that you trust, a couple things set up so that you can, like, if you get to a weird place in your brain, that you can go to another place because you already have something set up and ready to go. A playlist.
5 grams of silent darkness.
But that's more of like where I'm at with it now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't hang out with people. If I'm tripping, you'll never know. I'm like at my house. It is at a time where the world is sleeping. Yeah. And I am like on my yoga mat for 6 hours.
That's how it was for a long time.
With like some meditative tones playing and like, my bong or like a little rig. It's like a Puffco and some crystals. And I'm fucking traveling the galaxy in my brain.
Yeah, I used to be like, all right, I'm going to eat this crazy amount of psychedelics and go out and Fellsport.
Thanks. Yeah.
Shit, let's go. And I'd have a blast. And
dude, at the shop, we would just be eating. And it was like wandering around the neighborhood, just all over Charles Village.
And nothing but good things happen. It's to be, test your drugs and make sure that you're taking good stuff. But it was, it's something to be careful with for sure. And have intentions, watch what you're eating. I just, come back to where it started. It presented itself to me at a certain point. And then at another point, it said to me, it was like, our time is done. Not like you have to be, I'm done with it forever. But like at a point, it was like, hey man, we got through the curriculum.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's the cool thing about psychedelics, as opposed to like opiates or other drugs, is that I don't want to say you can't abuse them, but they're pretty self-regulatory. Right. In that, like, one, you can only do them consecutively so often. You can't. You're going to be wasting money after a while. And it has an agenda itself, right? When you do it, it lays it out clearly for you. It's so hard to explain. And sometimes you don't feel like that at all. Sometimes you feel like there's no plan. You can't see it because you're in it. But afterwards, you're always like, there was always a moment of realization for me. And when that stopped happening, I knew that I was like, oh, this is just fun at this point.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I think at a point it was just like, oh, okay. Like, this has been a good experience. And, I encourage anybody that feels drawn to it or interested in it to recognize when you're getting the call. I don't want to sound like a hippie, but it's definitely a legitimate thing in my opinion. And, I know enough people that have been serious about experimenting with psychedelics at this point in life. Physicians, the first time I did psychedelics was like real, like hard psychedelics was with 2 pediatric oncologists. You know what I'm saying? They were in the group I was with, and it was
interesting.
Yeah. And they were able to get a good bit of value and growth from it that was necessary in their line of work because they work in a horrific industry. It's
you gotta be able to let that go.
Difficult to exist in, and they noticed benefit. And I don't know, when a PhD holder is like, hey man, like I find a lot of value in this. I'm listening, especially someone in my state of mind with PTSD and all these other things. And I mean, I don't have to tell you, look at any, the research papers through MAPS and Zendo and all these liaising companies between the federal government, the medical community, and the scientific community.
Trials.
All these trials are showing nothing but tremendous benefit for people. And it's indicative now, if you look at the legislation passing, it's now legal to like do ketamine-assisted therapy and like, MDMA-assisted therapy, and how prolific the studies are for psychedelics, particularly psilocybin and lysergic acid, all the research chemicals now, the 2CB and 2CI.
Did you ever do those back in the day? Dude, I don't even remember all the different ones or why this one kid had them.
Oh, drastic differences. And they're no different from acid.
Some of these, like, the visuals were so different. I remember shooting dope while I was on some of them being like, whoa, like trying to fucking like focus enough to fucking make it happen.
It's I mean, there's been some that were harder than others for sure. And it was, stuck with cannabis and psychedelics for a long time. So even at a point, cannabis just stopped being what I needed it to be.
Right.
And
I don't know if that ever going to hit a point for me.
Yeah, I still see so much value in it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm so grateful that I had it when I did. You know, I had friendships I wouldn't have had otherwise. With great people, and people that, you know, infused my life with a lot of positivity and wisdom. And yeah, man, I got nothing but good things to say about those experiences. You know, and
deer season, baby.
Rifle season just started. The Worcester County firing range is right down the street.
You know, my kids had no school on Monday because rifle season started.
Wow.
The start of rifle season, all the kids get off school.
Damn, that's wild.
That's PA, baby.
Damn. Yeah, man, it's crazy. Yeah, man, what time?
I don't know.
You'll watch. I don't know why I thought that.
It's not yet 5 o'clock because it's still light out.
True. But yeah, those experiences were valuable, man. I can't speak enough to them. And they've influenced so many other parts of my life. The way I think about things, the way I think about conflict and how to deal with stressful things for myself, or advice I can give to other people. How much to invest in that, because it is their ride, you know?
Well,
so trying to offer good advice, like considerations, and how to be more present for people I care about in positive ways without being overbearing. It's always a work in progress, but you know, those things I feel like jumped me ahead in a lot of what I was trying to do. And sometimes that's uncomfortable, which is why it's such a shame that we don't have forums where this sort of thing can happen with medical supervision. And like,
do you think it has the same effect when you're in a room full of doctors and in a fluorescently lit hospital room?
Good question.
Because I mean, my experience, because I've thought about that, and I read that DMT Rick Strassman book, and like just even thinking about like doing mushrooms and like answering a bunch of questions to a doctor seems absolutely absurd to me.
Yeah.
But that's also only because I don't have that experience, and it's been so drastic. My experience is, again, you know, starting in high school.
Yeah. So my thoughts on that are, I'd have to assume that anyone interested in participating in that from the medical side would be an autodidact and kind of learn what's going to be optimal. You know, like if you look like Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, one of the best shows, if you're interested in learning about compounds.
We let the mushrooms guide us.
Yeah, exactly. The 5-MeO DMT episode where he goes to Sonora.
Yeah, I have not.
Yeah, watch that episode.
No, I've watched it. I just have not tried the 5-MeO.
I talked to a buddy the other day that's in a giant band. One of my best buddies. He's like, dude, did you ever do ayahuasca? I was like, no. He's like, I went down the rabbit hole. I've done it a few times now. And be traveling like Central America. And like, I was like, yeah, I have some friends that have done 5-MeO.
There's a spot in Maryland.
He's like, oh, I did 5-MeO a couple times. I'm like, Jesus. Like, he's like, yeah. He's like, the guys told me, you know, and it's physicians that help you through this, but it's like a comfortable space. They really try to be considerate about setting up the room and the space you're going to be in.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's actually really cool, right? Like, if they're like, when you're on these compounds, you're going to feel certain ways. There's things you're going to want or need access to. We want to be able to provide them and make sure that we're really like we're taking the like hurdles out of the way for you that you would otherwise have to circumnavigate if you're on your own in your house, you know? And especially if you know that like, okay, I'm with a medical professional that can tell me clearly whether or not I'm in real trouble medically, because I don't care who you are. If you've really taken a chance with psychedelics and gone for it, there's going to be times where you're like, am I dying? What is something really wrong? So to have someone there, and that was another thing. The first time I went to Burning Man, still the only time we're trying to go this year.
Scheduling that off time, baby.
Yeah, the person I went with and I volunteered for Zendo Project, which is a psychedelic harm reduction nonprofit. So their whole thing is they go to events or, you know, clinics where they're doing these sorts of things. There's a paramedic, there's, you know, people that have gone through a counseling certification program, and the whole job is just to make people comfortable while they're in the throes of a heavy psychedelic experience. And that's valuable because, you know, if someone with credentials presents themselves to you, and I know it's difficult to imagine like grasping onto any.
But in that scenario, it totally makes sense. That's, you know, I mean, think about how many times you, especially at a festival, and you may have multiple things going on in your body. And then, you know, I mean, I've definitely been in some fucking rabbit holes and various different states of mind that, like, you have to, the only way to learn how to grow through that is to go through it.
100%.
You know?
And that's why I like it. Like, hey, man, you don't got to worry about your physical health. You're good. Focus on what's bugging you.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that would be valuable. You know, a lot of people might otherwise be apprehensive about doing this sort of thing because of that consideration, that they might find themselves in a difficult or uncertain position. And then all of a sudden it becomes about this auxiliary fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
That something medically is wrong, or that that you can't, you know, you might feel ill or whatever. You know, taking away, it's like, no, that's just the compound. Like, it's going to make you feel a little uncomfortable, but you're safe otherwise.
At some point, when you can grasp what the concept of time means, you will be okay.
Exactly.
You know, and it's like, oh, okay, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So having someone that's like balanced,
yeah,
you know, trip sitter, especially if that person comes from the medical community, they've studied this thing, you know.
I feel like I could start that business just with how many times I've done it for nothing.
Yeah. And
no money.
You know, when we did that, it was interesting. We did one shift, and I only had one guy come in all night. He was probably 55, maybe, and he was on a ton of MDMA, and he was like, just having a
that heart rate can get a little when you're in the up part of the roll.
So they come in, and it's this beautiful tent that's set up, and they have like carpets down, and there's like little cots to lay on, and it's dim, and there's coloring books, and like, you know, snacks and water and soda and like things people might need. You come in, you tell the person at the desk at the door what's going on. A paramedic checks your vitals. Like, hey man, you're all good. Just come on in and relax. All of a sudden, it changes the whole vibe, right? Because you might have been worried about, like, man, am I having a cardiac event? Am I sick? Was I drugged?
Yeah.
Did I overdose on something? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, someone's going, nope, none of that's a factor. You're all good.
Yeah, and
you're
like,
just dealing with an uncomfortable experience.
Let me get back to, let me take a minute breather, and then I'm back to it.
An hour. At one point, he's like, I need to go to the bathroom. So I walked him to the porta potties, and he went. I waited, and came out. We went back to the tent. We get to the door. He's like, you know, I think I'm good. And I was like, okay, cool. Come on in and just sign yourself out. He signed himself out, and he went on to enjoy his night. And man, imagine how valuable that is.
Yeah.
Like, you have cool people that are...
You saved that guy's whole rest of his trip.
The whole goal is altruism in that event. It's like, how can I serve people that are in the position that I might be in at one point, or have been in, where I would have really valued someone being able to, like, be chill with me, not judge me for what I was doing, know that it had value. Because, you know, people drink themselves into blackouts nightly, weekly.
You need a designated driver when you go out to the bar.
That's brutal, you know? And we dive into this thing because it's legal and safe. Even though people get stuck in traps, they get DUIs, they get all sorts of problems that arise as a result of their addiction to alcohol and use of it. But it's the legal option, you know? Same thing with cannabis now. Now more than ever, you get people that are like panicking, they're too high, they haven't had experience with it, but now it's a legal option, so they can reach out to a medical professional. That didn't used to be an option.
Right.
Because now you're in trouble, right?
Right.
So when that's available, I think you'll see, I don't want to say a revolution, but
it'll evolve
you'll see a bit of a renaissance in society's relationship with those things, you know. And if you look at history, I think psychedelics are pretty involved in a lot of the heavy shifts in history, all the way back to the agricultural revolution. People
have you read what is it? Oh my God, Brian Oresco, The Immortality Key.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Dude, next time you throw...
That methotriptamine book, right?
No, he's basically looking for use of psychedelic compounds in the ancient Greek mysteries and Eleusis.
Oh, man, that's so cool.
And like, dude, I mean, it's like a big boy book. Yeah. Highly recommend it. At the minimum, if you're not going to read it, get it on the audiobook. I think you'd love it. But he's like, he's like a classicist, and, you know, he's into like Carl Ruck and kind of wants to take some of his work, but he's never done psychedelics. So like he has like a different
perspective.
Well, yeah, but if you've done psychedelics in that field, you're like shunned, you know, like look at Leary, right?
Yeah, and, crazy.
Yeah, you're like a nut job. So your work isn't respected. Like it's like some hoity-toity shit. This dude has all these qualifications to like look at these things in a different perspective, but also still like without people being able to just write him off as some kook writing about psychedelics. And he goes through this book. I mean, he goes to like Göbekli Tepe or whatever it is, and like how they found certain shit in different like how what basically like the history of beer and what beer and wine looked like back in that time period, and what certain ancient Greek, like he goes to Greece and like does all this research there. And I mean, it's crazy because, you know, the mysteries at Eleusis were like a thing where at the who's who of that era were there. Socrates, all the philosophers, and, you know, like main people. And that's, you had to fucking get initiated in and take these psychedelics. And they found that it was like a ergot compound off of like wheat that grew right in that area. And they used that.
Stuff is wild.
Bro, they're like, they think it's like acid, basically. It has some synthesis.
Well, that's what they. Yeah, it's really interesting. The Salem witch trials.
Dude, they said that could have been from bread.
Rye bread being
that was cooked
stale.
with ergot, and people had it and had ergot poisoning, and they got all crazy, tripping.
Well, you think about most like pilgrims, the families.
Imagine if you're a fucking Puritan.
Yeah, miles apart, and they're all going to the same baker. So all their bread's turning at the same time.
Right.
And then you get into this wild feedback loop, and
you've never heard of anything like that.
Hermit living in the woods, man. She's a fucking witch.
Yeah.
I can see it. Like, what a crazy. Imagine not eating that shit and then having a bunch of crazy old like pilgrim farmers.
Yeah. Or
coming after you.
Or you're tripping and you're like, my wife is a witch.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
yeah, dude. And
think you're hearing these voices in your head that you've never heard before.
Yeah.
You're in that mindset,
you're making connection,
and you're like,
yeah.
Because I mean, dude, acid. There's a sharp edge to it.
100%.
Like, you know,
especially the right type.
There's been some shit that I've eaten that it's like I can see how people get violent on drugs like that.
100%.
You know, and it's
if you have mental health issues that are kind of dormant, it can definitely kind of tilt them.
Well, I'm somebody that naturally like has these, like, you know, it's like if I'm too close to like the edge of a tall building, like what I visualize myself jumping off the fucking building, just
call of the void.
You know,
I mean, look, in terms of psychedelics and their use in culture all around the world, you could find different versions of things, different types of psychedelic stuff that existed that doesn't anymore, and that'll continue, right? It's inherent to most modern culture, and it's present in modern culture. Dude, the iPhone, it's a result of a business maverick who worked in tech, who did a lot of psychedelics, and you could read about it. It's prevalent. You could, you know, there's
Elon Musk talks about being on ketamine therapy,
dude. You look at,
not that I necessarily care about Elon Musk, but the fact that people like that are talking about that.
Well, they're looking for a perspective shift, and it offers one that you're not going to get anywhere else. Not in that way. You could travel, you could do all these things, which are all amazing and will shift your perspective. But there's, you know, it makes a difference.
Well, I know for me, my whole, from the start of getting, like, from the very first time I took acid, I was like, it was a part of a quest searching for God.
Yeah.
You know? And so, like, for the longest, and even still, it's like something that, you know, I feel like there's the ego is out of the way to be able to, like, really look at what it takes to be a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, you actually, and you kind of touched on it a little while ago, but it actually, you said it to me one time in a slightly different way, but you were like, yeah, there's no such thing as a bad trip. It's like, sorry, Karen, you're seeing your toxic patterns of behavior and don't want to change them. And so your ego is just blocking that.
Yeah.
It's making, and so you're freaking out.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
you realize, well, I'm uncomfortable with this thing about myself or this thing in my life that I have the power to remove, but I've chosen not to. And it's, you know, sometimes you're in situations you can't get out of. I don't mean to be insensitive to that, but it's, yeah, man, it's inherent to most religions. You know, you're going to see versions of it, you know, psychedelic, you know, delusions brought on by fasting, you know, all sorts of different things people have done, breathing exercises done by, you know, monks and
Kundalini yoga.
Yeah, exactly, dude. It's
reaching like DMT-like states.
Yeah, there's a reason people have sought these altered mind states out for centuries, and they'll continue to, you know. Why do you think people hit the gym so hard? Or they, you know, it does something to your brain. You have natural reward centers that, you know, have chemicals that are endogenous to your body, and your body produces them. And you can control, you know, with certain compounds or certain exercises or certain methods, how to release these, or how to isolate them, or how to perpetuate their presence in your body. And people will continue to seek that out as long as they're seeing positive results from it, which is inherent to the experience. And that's why it's such a continuous part of our culture. It's never going to go away. And you look at mavericks and crazy writers like Hunter S. Thompson and all these people.
Big in my early psychedelic
dude. All these
usage
have, they're looking for something. And usually they get enough of a thread to pull on it. And the interesting thing about, that part of the culture, Hunter S. Thompson and heavy war on drugs time and all these things, is that you're a renegade now, right? You're a criminal because of your use of these things, looking for something positive. So that colors the experience, and it definitely affects how the outcome of your experience with it. So I think back to what we were saying, being able to do it with medical supervision without the fear of getting into trouble, without the stigma from, your social circle or society. It'd be like going in for a procedure or going in for therapy. To have an opportunity to use it with all that pressure off of it, I think would articulate and heighten the experience to the point where you're maximizing benefit, you're reducing risk, harm reduction, and you're offering people that would otherwise not feel comfortable doing it an opportunity to be better versions of themselves, which only benefits everybody else, because all of a sudden you now have a quarter instead of a penny. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's in your life. You have someone that has a bit more to bring to the table, but they're more comfortable with themselves. So being around them is easier. Working with them is easier. Being married to them is easier. Being friends with them is easier. Getting dinner, getting a cup of coffee with them is better. It's something you look forward to more as a result of them being more comfortable with themselves and improving as an individual as a result of these endeavors, because I stand by it. They've benefited me tremendously. They made me a better person. There might have been a refractory period where I had to deal with everything I learned, but in the end, any benefit that's happened in my life as a result of me making choices differently.
Right.
And my period with psychedelics offered me an opportunity to really look at how I make decisions and really kind of optimize my ability to consider myself and the people around me in such a way that makes my life better. And as such, I can be more present for my family, my sister, my niece, my nephews, my wife, whatever. I'll never devalue that in conversation with somebody. I'll always kind of go to task for explaining why I think these things are positive, if you feel compelled to experiment with them. I'm never the guy that's like, you should do this, it's going to be better. Well, not anymore. But if people, and regularly, I had a woman that's mother of an acquaintance recently, affluent, they have money, she's in her 60s. She pulled me aside. She was like, I just got these. She had this giant bag of mushrooms. And she was like, well, I want to microdose, I don't know. I took a little bit, nothing happened. And I was like, I got an opportunity to talk to her about it. Give her some information that might make her feel better. And that's cool, right? I like that older folks, more conservative outlooks, are now considering these things as viable opportunities to improve, because the accessibility is there for everybody. It really levels the playing. So yeah, it's a valuable thing. And this is apart from very real, issue of white privilege and people not wanting to ride around in cars with shit that they could get in trouble for having because of the color of their skin. You look at all that. I'm not disregarding that that's a valuable consideration. Some people can't move freely with this stuff like an affluent woman can, a local business owner can in the community, but goes all back to what I'm saying. If we were in a position where this, you wouldn't be at risk for losing your life to jail or whatever, because these things are now not going to get you penalized in such a way. Even decriminalization really takes the foot off the neck of the experience of people wanting to.
Well, that's the way to go.
So it's just, it's cool seeing that now. She's this 65-year-old woman.
Yeah.
I just got this giant bag. I'm looking at him, I'm like, Jesus, it is broad daylight. We're in her driveway in this cul-de-sac community. I'm like, yeah. I was like, microdosing is sub-psychedelic. You're not really going to feel it that much, if at all.
Psychedelic. I love
there's
that.
other things you're going to notice eventually if you really, I was like, but the problem with this.
But you also have to gauge, too, from the large dose.
Yeah.
And then I think, find where your micro fits.
Yeah, and that's different from mushroom to mushroom, dose to dose.
Yeah.
And that's an important consideration. A lot of people don't think about it.
No.
They're just like, well, I'll microdose. I'm going to take this much of this every day. It's like, where are you going to get enough to do that for a year? Like, that it's going to be inconsistent. There's only so much you can.
Right. It's going to be different from if it was the first
like
flush
doing
versus
this,
second flush.
Doing this a couple times a year, every couple of months, it's going to, at a high dose, is going to be more valuable, in my opinion. So it's, I don't know, it's one of those things I could talk about psychedelics.
Yeah. So, cause I'm running out of battery, so we're going to have to be done here soon. But,
okay.
I was wondering also, so I know you said that you're thinking about, you want to write more.
Yeah.
Have you thought about, are you going to stay with it, write another novel, you think, next? Or have you thought about doing something nonfiction, based on some of your experience and wanting to help people and,
Sure. So I've thought about, I have a nonfiction idea that's more about skateboard culture. But I'm going to write another fiction book. I'm actually in the process of outlining.
I was going to ask if you started.
So, yeah, I'm going to write a spy novel.
That's my favorite kind of stuff.
It's kind of like almost paranormal. So I'm really excited.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pumped up about it. I've always been a fan of spy films and spy novels, so I was like, I want to jump in. I wanted this to almost feel like a Western, Yeah. It doesn't take place in the West. It doesn't take place in that era, but the style of a Western novel, I really love those. And it was a huge influence to me while I was getting ready to write this, and while I was writing it, I was constantly reading. Yeah, I'll definitely be doing another fiction novel, and that'll, however quickly that happens, just depends on my life. But it's definitely in process.
Do you think you're going to do it in the same kind of style of like the different time periods?
Probably not. This will be a little bit more linear. Might even be a little shorter.
Okay.
But, still be not a short story, but it's
almost like 2 in 1 with Fade into Reach because you have the two timelines.
Exactly.
Like there's, for the level of detail you have for what's happening, I feel like it has to be a longer novel.
Yeah, for sure. And in my mind, I had these lofty expectations. I was like, I want it to be 600 pages. I want it to be crazy. And
you want it to be a Journey to Mordor.
You get into writing it, and I'm like, fuck, 600 pages. I'm gonna have to readjust my goal there.
Makes you think about George R.R. Martin.
Dude, J.R. Tolkien.
Yeah.
All these people that have written, fucking Frank Herbert. These people that have written these just expansive world
Sir Arthur Conan
project.
I mean, all the Sherlock Holmes stuff that's been out there.
Oh yeah, I'm obsessed. With world building. I think it's so cool. I had a friend ask me, like, "Would you write a fantasy novel?" Because I love Tolkien and I love the Middle Earth work. And I was like, "Yeah, I just don't think I'm smart enough." That requires such an encyclopedic knowledge, not only of what you're trying to do, but all these other things, right? Because they're all different iterations of the same shit, and it's almost like archetypal,
right?
Like biblical stuff. So yeah, I mean, I eventually, I definitely want to keep writing.
Yeah.
To me, this feels like what I should have been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it feels like an appropriate place for me. I really love it. So I hope that I'm afforded the opportunity to keep doing it. And I'll continue to on my own time. But
I'll tell you what, I'm inspired.
Hopefully I get someone that's like, do you want to write? We'll give you money to write another one. Okay. Selling on my own is awesome. I've been really lucky. I've had so many people, including yourself, pre-order copies, and I was overwhelmed. I was like, man, if I sell like 20, it'll cover enough to make this initial order. 3 days later, I pre-sold like nearly 100, and I was like, shit. So I'm so lucky that worked out that way. I'm really excited to keep it moving, But yeah, it'll definitely continue. I'll definitely be doing more. Man,
I'm excited. For anybody. Fade in the Reach.
Yeah, at Tradecraft Photo on Instagram, Tradecraft FOTO, and there will be a website that might even be up by the time you do this.
This will probably be out in a couple of weeks to the masses.
Well, it's available.
Yeah,
it's out presently, so you can get it digitally right now. Any digital platform, Fade in the Reach. But yeah, let me know how you like it.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, let me know.
I'm excited, man. Thank you. Appreciate you, brother.
So happy to see you.
Love you. Out.
Man, how long?